Mystery of BELICENA VILLCA. Second Book. The Letter of BELICENA VILLCA. 17th Day. To carry out the last part of the White Fraternity plans, it required a reform in the Benedictine monastic system. It was necessary, above all, to concentrate the knowledge of the order and control, from that center, the main cultural functions of Occident. And such reform would not delay, due to, it was predicted beforehand, that's to say, it was an strategic alternative of the Gellams. In the same 9th century, when Charlemagne died, and his dynasty was preparing to begin a struggle between factions, for the pieces of the empire, that would endure 100 years, the change was already starting. In the year 814, Louis the Pious, the monk, gives all his support to Saint Benedict of Anion, for the foundation of a monastery in Aachen, where the Benedictine rule would be applied, with the maximum rigor. 3 years after, such monk, who had been sent to the Carolingian court by the Benedictine Pope Leo III, redacts and introduces the Capitulum Monachorum, and the Codex Moderarum, that would give initial foundation to the reform of the Benedictine order. But it will be in the 10th century, when the objective of concentrating the knowledge of order, to end definitively with the occupation of the monastery of Cluny. The delay must be adjusted to the compatibility that such objective had to keep with the security of the secret of the order. The Gellams could not run the risk, in the point of the facts, of a failure for improvidence. Because this Cluny's reform is only undertaken when is disposed of the security that it won't be interrupted. With the election of the Saxon Henry I, the Fowler, as Frank King and Emperor, in the year 919, entered in history, the extraordinary lineage of the Ottomans and Salians, a pure blood that would reach to produce a Frederick II Hohenstaufen, in the 13th century, the Hyperborean Emperor, who opposed with the power of the spirit, to the most satanic representatives of the cultural pact. In the 10th century, that powerful lineage was dedicated with vigor to reorganize the realm, while the papacy falls in the major discredit due to the management effectuated by the families of the Roman nobility, especially the Theodore, Crescentius, Tusculums, etc. The Benedictine order, that had decided to take advantage of the moment to work secretly in the formation of the College of Constructors of Temples, is assured since a beginning that no one would interfere in the operation of Cluny. Is that, precisely, the chosen place to obtain knowledge fell over a French monastery by exclusive security reasons. A succession of papal bulls emitted during the 10th and 11th century, obeyed to the letter by the Dukes of Aquitaine and the Kings of Burgundy, established the total independence of Cluny from any other authority except for the Pope or his abbots. Neither the kings, nor the dukes or counts, nor the regional bishops, could intervene in the issues of the monastery. Have you actually heard, Dr. Setonal, of certain secret bases that the great powers would have, for example, the Soviets, or the North Americans, where they have gathered a great number of scientists of all specialties, provided with the most advanced instrumental means, to plan in an integral form objectives of high reach, and that would depend directly of the President of some Supreme Council, and act independently of any kind of national authority apart from their own bosses or commanders? Well, Cluny was exactly the same in that 10th century. There was planned for a future Europe, Judeo-Christian, unified under the cathedrals, and the Temple of Solomon, controlled by military order of the Church, administered by a financial synarchy, and governed, finally, by the chosen people. His foremost, the same Benedictine Pope, whose unburied corpse was held to the Tiber by the Pope Stephen VI, follower of Lambert of Spelter, in vengeance, because he crowned Emperor to Arnulfo, who had nominated Bono to carry out the great mission. Bono was a Benedictine monk, of Burundian noble lineage, whose influence over the Duke William I of Aquitaine was utilized to convince him about the convenience of founding the monastery of Cluny. In the year 910, the own Bono took the guidance of the monastery and gives birth to the concentration of the knowledge. There are collected the main books and manuscripts that the order had in different monasteries, and is constituted a Gleam elite, dedicated to the copy of documents and the study of the sacred architecture. Of course, the Gleam elite, internally denominated cleric monks, would have to be occupied with exclusiveness of their works and to abandon the traditional Benedictine norm of sharing the works of maintenance of the monastery and the production of food. In this sense, was reformed the Benedictine rule, and was created the institution of the laic monks, to perform the honourable function to maintain the Gellams. During the command of the second abbot, Saint Dodo, the first fruits of the reform were at sight. First was diffused the fame about the asceticism and the perfection reached by the Columniac reform, what attracted the curiosity of other monasteries and caused the admiration of the people. Then groups of monks are sent specially trained to the monasteries that demand it, to initiate them in the reform. The members of the population were carefully selected to include them in the elite of cleric monks, or to put them in charge of the own works of the laical monks. Then were inaugurated monasteries submitted to the jurisdiction of Cluny, to those who were extended the rights of autonomy and independence. In that point, Cluny was a congregation, by own right, and who more enthusiastically supported Saint Dodo, with a papal bull in the year 932, in the Benedictine was Pope John XI, bastard son of the Pope Sergius III, and of Mariotta of Theodora, famous assassin of that age. After 150 years of activity, the congregation of Cluny, counted with 2,000 monasteries, distributed mainly in France, Germany and Italy, but also in Spain, England, Poland, etc. Without including the other thousands of Benedictine monasteries that have adopted the Columniac reform, but that not depend of the abbot of Cluny. In the middle of the 11th century, the order had achieved to transform effectively the European culture. Under the intellectual mantle of the Benedictines of Cluny, have been formed the operative Mason guilds, that demonstrated their proficiency in the Romanic art of construction and that they're ready to begin the Gaelic revolution, misnamed Gothic. Behind that movement, naturally, is the secret college of temple constructors. But also has been achieved to plant in the heart of the feudal lords the seed of the sentimentalism, the repentance and the Christian pietism. The sins increase more and more in the soul of the knight, and he requires of the alleviation of the sacerdotal confession, is accepted to disturb the warrior behavior, by means of the peace of God, and the truce of God, determined by the priests. The German warriors were moralized with the Jewish principles, of the law of God, the fear to the justice of God, etc. As a result of this emerges a special class of nobles and knights that, without losing their courage and audacity, but respectful of God and his representatives, are conditioned to outbreak blindly to any adventure that the Church demanded. The plans of the White Fraternity are being accomplished in all their parts. In the year 1000, after they had awestruck Europe with the proximity of the final judgment, the Gellams advanced a huge step when exposing to the German Emperor their project of reconstruction of the Western Roman Empire with capital in Rome, and achieving, that is, acceptance to displace the capital of the empire from its German base. Although that project would not be accomplished, the idea was already proposed and would influence for 250 years, in the imperial objectives of the German kingdom. The details of that plan were agreed, between the king, Otto the Great, and the Gleam Pope Sylvester II, whose name was Abbot of Erilac. In that plan of the year 1000, in the compromise that assumed the empire to fight against the unfaithfuls, especially against the Saracens of Spain, by a Goth militia, were clearly charged the concepts of the Crusades, and the military orders 100 years before their realization. But the success of the plan responded, in any case, to the subjection of the empire before the authority of the Pope, the dominion that the Church could impose over the naturally indomitable temperament of the German sovereign. Would be there, where would be measured again the forces of the cultural pact, against the unconscious remembrance of the pact of blood. For it the Gellams would seat in the throne of Saint Peter a Columniac reformer, of extreme fanaticism, the monk Hildebrand, who will pass to history as the Pope Gregory VII, the Pope who would humiliate the Emperor Henry VI in Canossa, before lifting him the excommunication, demonstrating with it the superiority of the spiritual power above the temporal power, that's to say, sustaining the ancient falsification of the sword the Atlantans and the priests of the cultural pact. For the Hyperborean wisdom of the pact of blood, contrarily, the spirit is eventually warrior, hence, the noble and warrior castes are spiritually superior to the priestly. But, with the weakness of Henry IV, the damage was already caused, and would be the turn of his descendants to fight against a Gallien papacy erected in director of the destiny of Occident. The Gelms never trusted and would never trust in the Germans, apart from the establishment of the College of Constructors of Cluny, is indicated by their favourable behaviour to the Lombard, as the favourite executors of their plans, followed by the Frenches. They, who not belonged, as was supposed, to the family of German populations but to a Celtic tribe, from Scandinavia. Ethnically different to the Norwegian Vikings, Swedish and Danish, had conquered a duchy, in the north of France, Normandy, that was officially recognized by Charles the Simple, in 911. By the Treaty of Peace pacted, then in St. Clair-sur-Epte, the Duke Rollo was baptized, and he accepted Christianity with his people, whose definitive evangelization was in hands of the Benedictine order. They didn't delay then, to erect the monasteries in the Normandy, and to remain, finally, all the Norman nobility, under the influences of Cluny. 150 years later, in 1066, the Duke of Normandy, William the Conqueror, Caesars of England, with the collaboration, unmasked betrayal, of the Benedictine order, of the island. Thanks to him entered again in England the members of the chosen people, who had been expelled in the year 920, by King Canute, the Great, under the accusation of enemies of the state. The Pope was, then the Benedictine Alexander II, but the minds that directed the maneuver are the called Guillaume Hildebrand, and Pedro Damiano. When he was succeeded in the papacy by the own Hildebrand, or Gregory VII, in 1073, an impressive strip, that descends from Ireland, covers England, Normandy, Flanders, France, Burgundy, Italy, and ends in Sicily, is submitted to the direct influence of the Gelms, from Cluny. In regard to Hildebrand, it is convenient to add, a fact that must not be forgotten. His Jewish origin. Hildebrand, indeed, was great-grandson of Baruch, the Jewish banker, who became Christian, and who was the head of Peroni's family, a lineage that influenced for centuries, in the papal elections. Thanks to the money of the Peronis, for example, Hildebrand had achieved the election of Alexander II, and his support for his own plans. And the Bank of the Pelonis, of course, was very charitable, and its charity, definitely, had a direct beneficiary. The congregation of Cluny, where his brothers of race and the Gelms, were preparing the world government, of the chosen people. To put in action the plan of the Gelms, will demand a preliminary attempt. That general proof of potentialities verification will be the First Crusade. In 1078, Gregory VII, and the major Guillaume headquarter, received two simultaneous news. The most important is the one that comes from the White Fraternity, where the Immortals approve the end, the transfer to Europe of the tablets of the law, occulted for 25 centuries, in Jerusalem, in the proximities of the Temple of Solomon. The other news comes from the Empire of the East, that is surrounded by a powerful military deployment of the Turks, who have already occupied Iran, Baghdad, Syria, Palestine, a great part of Asia Minor, and they have just appropriated from Jerusalem. These news make the Gelms decide about the form in which they will test their forces. They will preach the crusade, but, in principle, this won't aim to the main objective, but to a secondary. It will be divulged the nightly Christian necessity to give support to the Byzantine Church against the Turks. If such call gives the expected results, only then will be announced the duty to liberate a Holy Land. and only if this last claim is obeyed, only in this form, will be undertaken the mission of Jerusalem, to seek for the key of the Solomon's temple. Because, occurs that the recovery of the chosen people secret, is not easy. If it was occulted, for 21 centuries it was not because no one would have searched and found it before, but, due to, its concealment was deliberate and careful and it employed esoteric techniques. Its actual localization would demand the sending of a team of initiated priests, in the acoustic and numeral Kabbalah, to read and pronounce correctly the words that would open the secret lock, and that team should go in the appropriate moment, counting with the maximum security, because from that operation would depend the success, or failure, of a systematically planned strategy for 700 years. The Synod of Clermont, of 1095, is employed by the Gallien Pope Urban II, recent superior of Cluny, to call for a war against the unfaithfulness, and to free the Eastern Church. This war is, explained Urban II, a pilgrimage of armed knights. There would be special indulgences for all those who take the cross, and so compliant would be the heavens with the crusade, that then will supervene an extraordinary period of peace of God. Peter the Hermit, popular preacher, gathers a multitude of 100,000 people lacking of military preparation and means, that will be exterminated soon. Otherwise the army of Frank knights, Flemish and Normans, cause the admiration of the Gellams, are enlisted on it, Godfrey of Bouillon, Lord of the Lorraine, with his two brothers Baldwin and Eustace, Robert of Flanders, Robert of Normandy, Raymond of Toulouse, the Norman Lord of Italy, Bohemond of Taranto, and Tancred. To this army, could be requested, in first instance, the conquest of Jerusalem. After multiple difficulties only of the war, against your gallant enemy and religiously fanaticized, aggravated by the betrayals of the Byzantines, the Crusaders achieved the conquest of Jerusalem in 1099, 3 years after their departure from Europe. Is founded there a Christian kingdom, from which Godfrey of Bouillon was the first king. After that victory, the Gellams would only employ 30 years to find the tablets of the law, and transport them to Europe. Since then would begin the revolution of the Gaelic, or Gothic Revolution. Such step of the plan was developed with many parallel movements. In one side, was needed to prepare an appropriated place to receive the tablets of the law, decipher its message, and find the manner to apply the knowledge of the serpent, to the construction of temples. In the other side, was needed to send as soon as possible to Jerusalem, the team of initiated Gellams that would be in charge to localize the secret. And also, would be necessary to put immediately in march, the formation of the military order, that would sustain the financial synergy, that will have to be promptly created. If such movements ended in the proposed objectives, by the wide fraternity, then the world government of the chosen people would not delay, and the will of the Creator God One will be accomplished. The Benedictine monk Robert received in 1098 the order of retiring from the vicinities of Citos. In the year 1100, once known anew of the capture of Jerusalem, the Pope Paschal II puts him in front of the Citos Abbey, and entrusted him the reform of the Coluniac rule. Over the base of the Regula Monicorum of Saint Benedict, he and his successor Elbrick introduced substantial changes in regard to Cluny. The monks' return to the manual work is insisted with more rigor, the asceticism and loneliness, that is, in the secret, and the attire was changed. Thence, the Cistercians will not use the classic black clothing of the Coluniac and Benedictines, but a white one, similar to the ancient tunic of the Gellams, from the Roman Gaul, and to the one of the Levite priests, who guarded in Israel the ark, with the tablets of the law. In 1112, the community is ready to receive the group of initiates, that will give them their definitive conformation. They are 31, amongst them Saint Bernard, who was focused to found in Clairvaux, region of the Champagne, few de Verhugas, also from Gallien family, an adequate monastery to preserve the secret, that would come from the east. Once finished, with the pretext to effectuate translations of Hebrew texts, were convoked the main Kabbalistic rabbis, from Europe, to collaborate in the task of deciphering the tablets of the law. What a strange community of Scytos and Clervakes, integrated by Gelams and Jews, while whole Europe was proclaimed Christian, before the populations of unfaithful, from the east. At the death of Saint Bernard, existed 350 Cistercian monasteries, and at the end of the 13th century, reached to be 700 in Europe. In this way was carried out the first movement. In regard to Cluny, mustn't have to be believed that the foundation of the Scytos, and the expansion of the Order of the Temple, would wrest him some power. Proof of it is the huge volume that its installations reached in the 13th century. For example, in 1245, with motive of the General Council Lion, gathered by the Gelams, to excommunicate the Hyperborean Emperor Frederick II, a numerous retinue accompanied that pope, in his visit to Cluny, where they were accommodated easily, without needing that the monks would have to abandon their cells. That's to say, that it possessed an infrastructure to accommodate a pope, an emperor and a king of France, with all the prelates and lords of their corteges. Don't think that I am exaggerating, Dr. Seatonal. Apart from the Pope Innocent IV, were the two patriarchs of Antioquia and Constantinople, 12 cardinals, 3 archbishops, 15 bishops, the King of France Saint Louis, his mother Blanche of Castile, his brother the Duke of Artois, and his sister, the Emperor of Constantinople Baldwin II, the sons of the kings of Aragon and Castile, the Duke of Burgundy, 6 counts, and a high number of lords and knights. Its library, counted with 5,000 volumes copied by the friars, apart from the hundreds of manuscripts, scrolls and books of antiquity, that were unique pieces in Europe.